A hot summer night in small-town Quebec with nothing to do but hang out at the local square. 16-year-old Andre Vassard is huddled with friends, talking the talk of teenagers. It's Friday, July 28th, 1972. Maybe they're discussing School's Out. The Alice Cooper record had recently been released, perfectly expressing the frenetic comradery of 70s teen rebellion. Across the square, Constable Andre Goulet suddenly emerges from the St. Therese police station. Goulet is a rookie. He has served less than 2 years with the municipal force. When Goulet approaches the teens, Vassard flees down the main drag, then hurdles a fence into a back lot. According to police reports, Constable Goulet fired a warning shot into the air. Then, while attempting to scale the same fence, Goulet's gun accidentally discharged, shooting 16-year-old Andre Vassard in the head and killing him instantly. This is who killed Therese. In the days that followed, police claimed Vassard was carrying a brown paper bag containing a, quote, greenish substance, which was sent for laboratory analysis. Police also described the town square across from their police headquarters as a well-known drug hangout. The fleeing teen had instantly become a suspect for narcotics trafficking. Constable Goulet was simply doing good copper police work. Locals weren't buying it. 2 days of violent protests followed. By Sunday, July 30th, about 2,000 demonstrators, described by police as youths, were pelting the police station with rocks and bottles. A jeep was overturned. The windows of local businesses along Main Street shattered. Outmanned, the St. Therese police force called for reinforcements from the Sûreté du Québec, then called the Quebec Police Force, or QPF. Backed by policemen from the neighboring communities of Rosemere and Blainville, 30 riot-equipped QPF men were dispatched from their headquarters about 20 miles south in Montreal and managed to disperse the crowd. The helmeted and truncheon-carrying riot squad made 24 arrests, including the mayor's son, and charged locals with disturbing the peace and participating in an illegal demonstration. The chaos only diminished when St. Therese Police Acting Director Yvon Joyel assured the people there would be a public coroner's inquest to get to the bottom of what happened to Andre Vassard. By Monday, the residents of St. Therese were silenced after the mayor's literal reading of the riot act. Police barricaded the area where demonstrations had taken place. Police Assistant Director Joyel blamed the unrest on a few troublemakers. The overturned jeep had belonged to Constable Goulet's father. During the melee, Constable Goulet hunkered down in his parents' home 4 blocks from the police station. The mob found him and began pelting the Goulet home with bricks and bottles, chanting, "We want Goulet." As the family prepared to bury young Andre Vassard, Mayor René Robert trolled the streets with a loudspeaker-equipped police cruiser, like some cheap sideshow carny, the Larry Vaughan of this Montreal suburb, reminding everyone that the penalty for gathering in groups of more than 3 was life imprisonment. In an earlier interview, Robert expressed how he hoped that calm would be restored. For the sake of our citizens and the economy here, he welcomed a public inquiry that would clear the name of our police force. Mayor René Robert showed up at Andre Vassard's funeral, and the family refused to receive him. The funeral procession had an unwelcomed 6-car QPF police escort. Andre Vassard's father, Maurice Vassard, vowed to, quote, get to the truth no matter how long it takes and how much it costs. A negotiator with the Quebec Department of Labour, Vassard managed to rally a number of public bodies, including Quebec's Federation of Labour, the United Auto Workers, and the local chapter of the Canadian Civil Liberties Union, who all called for a public inquiry into his son's death. Vassard stated, "I don't believe that my son had drugs in his possession," and claimed to have evidence that St. Therese police were improperly trained. He told reporters how Andre Vassard had been one of the first Quebec patients to successfully undergo open-heart surgery. "What modern science has saved, the law has destroyed," he said. And this is Maurice Vassard in an interview in 1972 with Le Petit Journal. But what can incompetent people like those hired by our city do? My son's killer, after having worked with his father in the rental and sale of slot machines, decided one day to become police, and he was given the attributes of this position without being asked for anything else. Another, a barber, went bankrupt. The next day, he was a policeman. A milkman from our region, fired for having obviously tampered with his accounts, was also propelled to the title of police officer. My boy is the latest one these guys kill. By midweek, the St. Therese police clarified earlier statements. Around 7:30 p.m., Friday, July 28th, the police station janitor complained someone was outside selling hashish to teenagers. Constable Goulet was off duty and partially out of uniform when he approached Andre Vassard in the square. In addition to firing a warning shot, Goulet claimed to have given verbal warnings and shouting, "Stop or we'll shoot." According to the police report, after vaulting the 3-foot wire fence, Goulet's knees buckled when he landed on the other side of the fence, and his muscles tightened. The gun fired accidentally. The accompanying officer, Desk Sergeant Robert Arnault, reported that he almost felt the bullet whiz past his throat. When they caught up with Andre Vassard, he was lying face down, bleeding from the back of his head. Lying beside the dead youth was a brown paper bag containing a green substance, described as, quote, like tea leaves. Finally, police reassured the press that, quote, outside agitators had been responsible for the weekend violence. At the town watering hole, the Hotel Blainville, which was right across the street from the police station and the square, the shooting was the main topic of conversation. The reason they're coming down on everyone so heavily is because one of their own is being blamed for something, and they're forming their shell, offered a Laval Hydro-Quebec worker. A 20-year-old printing apprentice said the shooting was just another event in St. Therese where the youth don't have any rights. I knew there was someone in the park selling pot. The police say it was a pound of hashish, but I heard the guy had 3 ounces of grass to sell. And then I came over to the tavern. Sitting at the bar, 18-year-old Claude Chenier had this to say about Constable Andre Goulet. I didn't know him myself, but I had heard people talk of him before. He wasn't liked. He's only 21 and he enjoys his authority too much. In 1972, the Hotel Blainville was called the Heart of St. Therese, and it still is. If you followed this website or podcast, you'll recognize it as the center of another story we've covered, the 1973 murder of Carole Dupont. And St. Therese is also where Réal Chartrand held up with hostages after shooting St. Therese police constable Gabriel Labelle just 9 months earlier in 1971. For a little Quebec town, St. Therese has seen a lot of action. And there I'll add, yeah, it certainly has. And I have the bar in the Hotel Blainville still stands, and I've been there. It has not changed. And the characters who are in there, look like they could be the 20-year-old printing apprentice or the 18-year-old kid now, in their 50s and 60s, easily. They all look like the same cast of characters. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, I walked in and they thought, I was police or something other than a local. I wasn't fooling anyone that I was a local. Sat, read the Journal de Montréal as if I'm, just a local. I wasn't. It was nothing doing. But I'm telling you, the place is, there's a little bar, and then in the back, there's a room with small tables and chairs and like a tiny stage, which is now for a DJ, but you could easily envision that in 73, it was the dance stage where Carole Dupont was like a topless stripper. And all of these events St. Therese is tiny, man. It's a tightly focused, right? I mean, the fence Vassard jumped, next to the old folks' home is right next to where Carole Dupont's body was found in the snow. They basically buttress each other. So this is a tight, congested story, really, in time, 71, 72, 73. You could run these together and call it like the St. Therese or Hotel Blainville trilogy, and it would work. Just so happens we told them out of sequence. So the Hotel Blainville, for some reason, nicknamed the Ashby, and the police station and the square, it's this square is an overreach. The square, at that time it was known as the Fountain and that's an apt description because it could basically hold a fountain and, a few trimmings of grass. It's what my father used to call a postage stamp park. About the size of a postage stamp. That's the Fountain, right? So the Ashby, Hotel Blainville, the Fountain, the square, and they're all within in the shadow of the town has this beautiful triple spiraled 19th century gray stone like Catholic church. And at the time, Father Guy Champagne assessed what was a dark tragedy. He said, when I first came here in 1955, there was an accepted hierarchy. The mayor was a man of social importance, and the church was the heart of the community. But now that it's been all completely smashed, and nothing has arisen to replace it. The coroner's inquest began on Wednesday, August 9th. On the first day of testimony heard before coroner Jean-Louis Tellon, at the Saint Jerome courthouse. I think we've heard that name before. 20-year-old constable Andre Goulet told the court how he was hired in October 1970, handed a badge and a gun, and told, "You'll learn by experience." As I said, the pursuit of Vassard took place right down the town's main drag, down Rue Blainville, past the Ashby, and through a throng of evening shoppers until Vassard, by now referred to as a suspected drug pusher, so this 16-year-old kid has been elevated, he darted into the grounds of an old folks' home, the Foyer Drapeau. And as I said, note that these are the same grounds where Dupont's body was found 20 months later during the spring thaw. Goulet's warning shot was not fired into the air, but parallel to the ground. And this we know from the testimony. Goulet says, "He was running towards the seminary fence behind the old folks' home. I fired a shot into the field in front of me." And the Crown prosecutor says, "Weren't you afraid of hitting someone in the field, or that the bullet might ricochet off the fence or a tree?" And Goulet responds, "It was still clear, and I couldn't see anybody in the field. Perhaps there was someone on the other side near the Lionel Groux College. I put my left hand on the fence, and I was in the air when the revolver went off." So we all owe our lives to the keen sense of perception and understanding of his surroundings of young Constable Goulet. Goulet went on to tell the coroner's inquest how he learned to shoot when acting police chief Yvan Joël took him out to a gravel pit and had him fire off a box of shells with a .38 Colt revolver. In addition, he said he had spent less than 2 hours practicing at the Montreal Police firing range. Goulet explained how the St. Therese police didn't supply bullets, so occasionally he borrowed some shells and fired them off at his cottage. He claimed to be a bad shot and last had his eyes tested in 1970. Subsequent to these events, the St. Therese police force pledged to send all recruits to a 16-week training course at the Quebec Police Academy in Nicolette. Yes, we all know Nicolette. We know that if Quebec's finest get the training at Nicolette, don't worry. The public safety is assured. Sergeant Robert Arnault later testified that he wasn't aware that Goulet had joined him in the pursuit, so they were together until Goulet's warning shot practically grazed his throat. Arnault told the inquest that he never drew his revolver during the chase. "I wouldn't have used my firearm anyway." Thank you, Arnault. A chemist from the Quebec Medical Legal Institute, housed in the same facility as Quebec Police Force, testified that the brown bag found next to Vassard's body contained just under an ounce of marijuana. In the following days, the police version of events were contradicted by witnesses. A 77-year-old resident of Foyer Drapeau retirement home said he saw Constable Goulet take deliberate aim when he shot Andre Vassard. "He shot like this," Jeremy Lafleur told the coroner, holding his arm out in front of him in a firing position. "He stopped running, aimed, and shot." Jeremy Lafleur also confirmed that the running youth had a bag in his hand. A ballistics expert told the court it would take a very good shot to take down a moving target at 100 feet. 77-year-old geriatrics statement. Lafleur's statement was problematic. The pensioner, he stated that 5 minutes elapsed between the warning shot and the fatal shot, 5 minutes. And when the prosecutor did an experiment in court and asked him to tell the court when 5 minutes had passed, Lafleur stopped him after 5 seconds. So his time perception at 77, shall we say, a little off. Lafleur testified that both officers were wearing their hats. It was established that Goulet was partially out of uniform and hatless. Asked how he knew it was Goulet that shot Vassard, Lafleur explained, "Because I read it in the newspapers." This testimony prompted Coroner Jean-Louis Talon to admonish the local press for misleading reporting. Specifically, Talon rebuked the French-language daily Journal du Montréal for running the headline, "Vassard Inquest. Goulet testifies, I aimed, I fired." The text superimposed over a photograph of Constable Andre Goulet with his arm held out in front of him. I put that photo, there's a lot of great photos in this episode, and they're on the website thereseallore.com, ThereSallore.com. So Talon continued commenting on this photograph. The same paper which will use a defamatory headline or story, ruining a man's reputation for years, often runs stories defending civil rights on the opposite page. And the coroner promised a day of reckoning for people who are not journalists, but simply people who carry press cards. Talon's comments would, of course, prove to be prophetic. This is practically the exact scenario that played out with Allo Police during the 1979 murder investigation of Maurice Marcil and Chantal Dupont. We don't have to go too much into this. We certainly know, we've talked many times of misleading reporting of the Quebecois-owned Journal de Montréal under the leadership of Mr. Pierre Palédo, misleading the public and the Therese Martin investigation, insinuating that she was a drug addict, insinuating that my sister was a drug addict. Though I appear to still be waiting for that day of reckoning. 2 other witnesses testified that the second shot was fired before Constable Goulet vaulted the fence. A crossing guard told the coroner that Goulet ran a few feet forward, stopped, and took another shot. A housewife who had just finished having her hair done testified that a policeman was in the same spot when I heard a second shot. He hadn't brought his arm down, so that can perhaps mitigate our septuagenarians missing 5 minutes. On the final day of testimony, Constable Goulet revealed under cross-examination that he had known Vassard from grade school. Goulet told the court that he had turned the youth over after having shot him, and he realized, I know him. We were in the same class for 3 years. It's very heartwarming, though I doubt it's true. There was a 5-year age difference between Goulet and Vassard, and unless they went to school in some little red schoolhouse where all the classes were different rows, 1 through 6, I somehow doubt, with the 5-year age difference in the growing up in the 70s or 60s, I guess the 60s. I went to school in the 60s. The 13-year-olds did not mix with the 18-year-olds in any class that I ever knew in Quebec.
Me and Jimmy, we ain't never gonna confess. We cheated at the math test. He called some dirty words in our desk.
On Friday, August 11th, Coroner Talon ruled Constable Andre Goulet criminally responsible for the July 28th slaying of Andre Vassard and recommended Quebec's Department of Justice place the entire Sainte Therese police force under trusteeship. After the reading of the verdict, Goulet was placed immediately under arrest. In his ruling, Talon took a swipe at the entire Sainte Therese community and specifically its municipal council, pointing out that the park where the events began gives off more marijuana smoke than water for its fountain. The fountain is in the shadow of the police department and the municipal council, which appears to be in the dark. Talon said he had visited the area more than 4 times since Vassard's death and believed there was an explosive situation building between, quote, the blue jeans and the police uniform. In his verdict, he said he held Constable Goulet responsible with great reserve because part of the responsibility lies with the employer. And this was why he was recommending the trusteeship. The question of the trusteeship was immediately put to then Premier Robert Bourassa, who said, given that Justice Minister Jérôme Choquette was on vacation, he would confer with Deputy Minister of Justice Robert Normand on the matter. Over the summer weekend, many demoralized Sainte Therese police officers threatened to resign, but they were talked down by the Police Brotherhood President Jean-Claude Cressel. Cassel fumed that the coroner ruled the force incompetent. That's completely false. Do you know that more than 3/4 of the police force have educations of grade 10 or better? Acting Chief Yvon Joël whinged that he only acted on the orders of the town manager. Meanwhile, Sainte Therese youths hoped the outcome would produce new recreational facilities so that they wouldn't be forced to congregate on city streets. At the Hotel Blainville, 59-year-old native of Sainte Therese Jean-Paul Croteau pondered the situation, indicating the municipal structure across the street. Just look at that police station. Sainte Therese's protection has been directed from the same puny offices for the last 75 years. There are 25 men on the police force, but that isn't nearly enough. Croteau's thoughts were not without merit. When General Motors built a plant in the region in the mid-60s, it provided jobs for many of the Sainte Therese unemployed, but the town rapidly doubled in population, straining resources. Just within the year that this story was covered by the local media, Sainte Therese went from being referred to as a town to the city of Sainte Therese. Other local residents also blamed the town's municipal administration and the provincial government for not providing adequate funds for public protection, completing the circle of blame.
Ah, Sainte Thérèse en haut. Ah, Sainte Thérèse en haut. Gis le cœur de cette chanson. Gis le cœur de cette chanson. Brainstorming, habit forming, battle warning, weary when some actors giving spineless chilling lines. The critics falling over to tell themselves he's boring and really not an awful lot of fun. Well, who the hell can he be when he's never had VD and he doesn't even sit on toilet seats? Court jesting, never resting, he must be very cunning to assume an air of dignity. And bless us all with his oratory prowess, his lame brain antics and his jumping in the air. And every night his act's the same, and so it must be all a game of chess he's playing. But you're wrong, Steve. You see, it's only solitaire.
By the following week, Quebec's Justice Department ruled that there would be no trusteeship for the St. Therese police force. They hoped the town would refer to a provincial white paper that had been produced the prior year on police and public security. In a remarkable turnaround, less than a week since his verdict, Coroner Talon said he was, quote, satisfied the decisions taken by the government are the best. I hope for the public security that the recommendations were taken under consideration. A St. Therese youth group urged the government to reconsider the decision. The Montreal Central Council of the Confederation of National Trade Unions recommended that the Quebec government disarm police to prevent more deaths, such as that of 16-year-old Andre Vassard. 5 months later, Constable Andre Goulet was freed at his preliminary hearing. Court Judge Andre Chalot ruled there was insufficient evidence to justify a trial on the charge of criminal negligence, and the judge assured that the ruling was not an acquittal. I just feel there isn't enough evidence that would allow a jury to find this constable guilty of the charge. After the ruling, the father of Constable Goulet, Elie Goulet, also a police officer with the St. Therese Police Department, speculated that he did not think his son would return to the force. Andre Goulet then spent 4 months training at the Nicollet Police Academy, graduating second in his class. On Monday, July 23, 1973, less than a year after the shooting, Constable Andre Goulet returned to work with the St. Therese Police Department. At the end of his first shift back, he unexpectedly quit his job, resigning, quote, for personal reasons. On the first anniversary of Andre Vassard's death, about 50 youths demonstrated outside the St. Therese police station. Again, stones were thrown, the windows of local businesses shattered. Andre Goulet was out of town on vacation and did not witness the protests. Andre Vassard's death became a brief rallying point for Quebec injustice, but was quickly forgotten. At a 1974 summer concert, the French artist Jacques Michel performed a protest song in Vassard's honor, Requiem pour un oiseau, Requiem for a bird. A reviewer complained that the song was too long and the lyrics didn't make much sense. A modern listener, to our modern ears, some of this may feel familiar. It certainly calls to totally disband the St. Therese police and look for other ways of reconciliation. Harkens to current calls to defund the police. On the other hand, we have voices that are saying the resources are not adequate, that they should scale up the police force. And I guess this is the point where I'm supposed to weigh in on that, which I absolutely refuse to do. This is what it is. It's not a morality tale where then I pass judgment. I find that kind of distasteful. It's a story, and I'm not going to give my analysis because this is Who Killed Theresa. This isn't the ACLU or ProPublica or the Heritage Foundation or John Locke or any of those. This is a podcast. This is Who Killed Theresa. And so you can read in that story what you like. Make your own conclusions. Use it as a wedge to make whatever argument you want. Couple announcements. I want to thank the kindness of some readers and listeners out there. Thank you, Lulu, for the chocolate and the book. I'm amassing quite a library here from listeners sending me books. I do appreciate it. Thank you, a listener bought the book and then listened to the episode of Hyperthymesia and was kind of jazzed by it. And I always appreciate the input, and I always try to respond to it. So thank you for that. There's a regular listener, Chip, who I usually post this on a Saturday, and by 5 o'clock on Saturday, he thanks me on Facebook. And it's always nice when I make someone's day. So I do appreciate that, and I'm aware of it. And so if you like the podcast, and if you like reading on Substack, I think it's John Allure Substack. I'm getting it wrong. What the hell is it? It's John Allure, JOHNALLORE, .substack.com, point. If you like those things, share them. Let's just say that. If you like the podcast, share it. If you like the website or the Substack readings, share them. It's very, very much appreciated. Be generous. I try to pay it forward. I've talked before about Christopher Curtis and his sort of guerrilla media enterprise, The Rover. I recently subscribed to The Rover because I'm just not getting in traditional media and newspapers the stories I want. And he's writing them, particularly from a very, very Quebec focused. He had a piece yesterday on the language situation in Quebec and the provincial government, the CAQ, trying to influence cultural teachings in high schools and things like that, in schools in Quebec. And that was just fascinating and fantastic, and took me away from true crime, which is always a good thing. So I've just subscribed as a paying subscriber to his Substack account because it's excellent. I get a newsletter and a story a week. I would rather that than, obviously the Journal de Montréal. I will still read La Presse. I'm finding less and less value in the Montreal Gazette. I'll just say it. That's not a ding at the reporters at all. That's more a mark on publishing. That is just, is kind of going the way of, I don't know. It's not going in a good direction and all that. There's other bright spots. Selena Ross, who did a long piece on the crisis at Cabot Square with the Inuit and prostitution and drugs. She just wrote a piece on the situation at Bishop's University. And we don't have time to go into that today. And basically at Bishop's in the Eastern Townships, there is again a call for a reckoning for the long history of sexual violence at that school and that campus, Champlain Bishop's. I've said all I want to say about it in Wish You Were Here. But Selena wrote a great piece for CTV News that was really, really in depth and more than just this sort of basic summary of here's what happened today. So there are bright spots out there, is what I would say. You can follow us, and the best way to do that is go to the website thereseallure.com. If you look there and to your right, there are links to go to the newsletter and other social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I am finding Facebook more and more useless. In fact, I'd be interested in your comments because I'm thinking of just abandoning it because nobody appears to use it. I get no engagement. I used to, but I get no engagement from Facebook, and that's fine. I don't care. But if nobody's going to use it, I'm not going to use it either. I get much more engagement from Substack, from Instagram especially, and from Twitter. So I would rather use those platforms. I think that's it for today. The Andre Vassard case, man. I tell you, maybe I'll say a little bit more. I found that story in Le Petit Journal when I was doing research on the Therese Martin case. And I had never heard of it. And I talked to locals who live in St. Therese, and they had never heard of it. Now they've heard of Carole Dupont, but not this story. And I shared this story with a writer with La Presse, and he had never heard of it. In fact, what held up doing this, you could argue this would be a better story for the summer. What held it up was this. This was going to be possibly hey, it's the cat. A tandem piece with La Presse, but they want to wait for the 50th anniversary. They want to wait for this summer. And I was like, I'm not going to wait for that. So I'll do the podcast now. And then they can do their story in the summer. It's not like it's going to affect each other's readership or listenership. Let's be honest here. So I do think that the Vassard piece is fascinating and a time capsule of quite obviously many things. We've had a lot of focus so far on police shootings, death by cop, and this is just another one telling that story. This has been Who Killed Teresa. I'm your host, John Allure. Have yourselves a great, great day.
I sat